Okay, I hope the next speaker is already here. Massimo told me amazing stories about Busisiwe Mavuso. She is the Chief Executive Officer at Business Leadership here in South Africa. And I'm pretty sure she can give you a better insight on what's going on in South Africa than I can. I can give you the best restaurants in Johannesburg. See? Definitely. So that's really something. Massimo, so please welcome Busisiwe. Perfect. Thank you. Please welcome.
Thank you. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yes. Perfect. Thank you. I learned it.
Okay.
I'm looking forward. Have fun.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you very much, Thorsten. I had an opportunity to speak to Marcus, last week with Massimo. Massimo, thanks for the invitation. Thanks to the entire TAPA leadership who have come down to South Africa to have this very important conversation with us. We really, really appreciate it because the issue of crime is one of the biggest issues that we're trying to solve for as a country right now. You know, when you speak to business and when you speak to CEOs, they will tell you the two biggest risks that we are facing as a country are network industries. I don't want to break them down. Network industries, which is the energy, transport, and now water is going to become another crisis. And then if you cluster those into one, network industries, they're important because no business can function without network industries. It doesn't matter which industry you sit in. You need a reliable energy supply, you need a reliable transport system, and you need water infrastructure that will function. So we've got 4 network industries as a country, 3 of them are dysfunctional. And the only one that is not dysfunctional is telecommunications. And maybe that is because someone at some point had the sense to privatize telecom. So telecoms is functioning as it should-ish. It's okay, we still haven't allocated the spectrum, but it's functioning as it should. 3 network industries are dysfunctional. And then very closely behind that, and I don't know, I think when you look at where crime is in South Africa at the moment, I'm sure they are at the same level. The next biggest problem that we're trying to solve for as businesses is the issue of crime and corruption. All of a sudden, as a country, we have been engulfed with this lawlessness. We used to be a rainbow nation. I don't know, it seems as if now we are chasing, I don't know which country is the worst in the world, Colombia, to being a mafia state. That is where we are as South Africa at the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And thank you very much for the invitation for me to come and have this conversation this morning. As you take a day out of your lives to look at the criminal risks that we are facing on the supply chains in South Africa, and you're trying to look at the required countermeasures that we have to put in place to ensure that we actually minimize this risk. So the conversation is important because, as I've said, it tries to answer the fundamental problem that we're having as a country today, which is really the problem of lawlessness. So I don't know how many of you saw the report last year, and because you work in this space, I'm sure you are aware of the report. The report around crime, of course, it was given by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. And when you look at the report, it basically says that South Africa is experiencing a dramatic expansion and legitimization of organized crime. And it's unfortunate because this is rising rapidly And it therefore means organized crime is now a threat to the stability of the country's democratic institutions. That is where we find ourselves as a country. And when you look at what, I'm probably going to botch this, Numbeo or Nambeo, I don't know how to pronounce it, Numbeo, when you look at what they've released in terms of their 2021 crime index rates, they are saying South Africa is the third most dangerous country in the world. And when you look at what the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime are saying, they put us among the 5 countries which have the highest female homicide rates as a country. I was listening to someone yesterday, I don't know if this is correct. I don't remember who it was. And they were actually saying that we have now taken the trophy as a country for being the most violent country in the world. That is where South Africa is currently sitting at the moment. So as you have this conversation this morning, I think you must just know that that is what you are up against as businesses. That is what you are essentially trying to solve for. And good luck in the conversations you are going to have today, because you sincerely need it. Lawlessness is what you are essentially trying to solve for. So it's not this, and I think Thorsten puts it right. It's supply chain, but what you are essentially trying to solve for, you're trying to solve for the issue of lawlessness in this country. We have degenerated to be a lawless country. And you know, when you look at it, lawlessness is a symptom. It is a symptom which signals that something underneath that is fundamentally broken. So as you try to look at why lawlessness is a problem in South Africa, you probably are going to have to look and say, it's okay, it's fine, we can put systems in place as we should, we can put all these security interventions as we should, but I think the bigger problem that we actually, and conversation that we're going to have as a country is, how did we get here? What is the genesis of this problem? What is the root of why we are sitting here as a country? And you will see that at the crux of why we are here, if you ask me, my view is that we are here because of leadership. Leadership is the fundamental problem that we should actually solve for as a country. Because as you degenerate into a lawless country, what interventions are you putting in place as the leadership to ensure that you disincentivize the thugs and the criminals to not come back and do more crime? So if you are failing to arrest it at that level, then you're actually going to have a problem. You know, under Nelson Mandela, we were a different country. Under Thabo Mbeki, you were a different country. Under Zuma, that thief, we were a different country. He gave us the state capture project. And under Cyril Ramaphosa, we were a different country. So how does the same, 30 years that I'm talking about, how do we move from being a rainbow nation into being a mafia state in 30 years? What has changed? Leadership has changed. You see, the important thing is that you're going to have to try and define, when you assume leadership, to say, what is my problem statement? What am I trying to solve for? What are the issues that this country needs addressing? And you therefore put interventions and policies in place to ensure that we can address that. If you are not doing that, then it's useless you being in a leadership position. If we are going to sit as industry and business and try and look at how do we solve for crime ourselves, it's pointless. Don't we have the South African Police Service in this country? But you see, I don't want to go to the South African Police Service because I think their issues are bigger than what they are actually comprehending. You know, I almost fell off my chair when I learned that we have 130,000 police men and women in this country. I almost fell off my chair. For a country of 62 million people, how the hell do 130,000 police officers get this right? There is absolutely no way, because when you do the ratio, you will see that it is 500 South Africans for every police officer. Where are they going to begin? And that is, by the way, assuming that the 130,000 police officers are on the ground, and they are not. Because some of them obviously occupy high positions, and they are never on the ground. So that number is actually less. So you're probably essentially looking at 700 South African citizens for every police officer. So when we look at the police and we say they are not doing their job, is that really where the problem is? And if we think crime is an intervention and an issue that we need to be solving for, what are we doing about strengthening the criminal justice system in this country? Because I don't think that we are putting in place enough interventions. So lawlessness is actually what you're actually trying to solve for as a country. You see, unless and until you have a leadership that is going to come down hard on crime and on criminals, you are not going to solve for the criminality. And the problem of why we are not going to take an exception to these criminals that are roaming the streets as a country, it's simple. We are not going to put out all stops to solve crime in this country because this fish called South Africa is rotten from the head. That is what the problem is. It's a disincentive to strengthen the criminal justice system because it means at the top where the crime is perpetuated, those people are actually going to be caught out. You know, this is what the State Capture Project did, by the way. The State Capture Project targeted the criminal justice system. Why? Because if you weaken the criminal justice system, then you can run amok as a country. Then you can loot until you go blind. Then you can actually, continue to actually use these entities as feeding troughs. Then you can actually continue the corruption. You can actually continue the malfeasance because your criminal justice system is weak. That is what the focus of the State Capture Project is. So we are not going to get crime right because this fish called South Africa is rotten from the head. I was listening to the cabinet reshuffle yesterday, and I was listening to see what interventions are we actually going to put in place, and are we going to change the Minister of Police? Is there going to be any announcement around the criminal justice system? State of the Nation address and whatever the case is. We were operating on it's business as usual. For our leaders, it's business as usual. The pain that we experience as businesses on the ground, they don't seem to actually be experiencing it. You see, it becomes particularly difficult to deal with crime when you've got thieves masquerading as government ministers. That is where we are as a country. It becomes particularly to deal with crime when you've got people that were implicated in the State Capture Project who are occupying high government seats, walking around with impunity. It cannot be. At what point did we get here at the country? At what point did we drop the bar so low? How did we get here? When did this become acceptable for us as South Africans? I listened to the interview of Andre de Ruyter last week or 2 weeks back or whatever the case is. And obviously in his interview, he brings across seriously damning allegations, and I was listening to it, and as a South African citizen, never mind a business leader, as a South African citizen, I was concerned. And I was interested to see what the response of government is going to be. And I don't know why I was disappointed, because I should have expected it. The response of government was throwing insults at Andre. White, racist, da, 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 da. You know, and you're thinking, what the hell? I would have thought that if you have a problem of energy security in this country, if the problem is so much so such that you have declared an entire state of disaster around it, the problem is so much such that you have created an entire ministry around it called the Minister of Electricity. When you hear allegations like that, when the CEO who has been at the helm says, you know, Mr. President, I see you trying to fix this thing. I see you putting in place a state of disaster. I see you putting in place a Minister of Electricity. I see you have put in place an electricity crisis plan. I see you have put in place NECOM. But maybe, just maybe, as you do that, you might actually want to look at the foundation of the, because that is what he was essentially saying. He was saying the foundation on which ESCOM is sitting is rotten. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to throw at ESCOM. If there are these criminal elements that have been legitimized, that actually have a direct line to government ministers, you are never going to be able to solve this thing. The rational response for me would have been for this government to say, we have to set up an inquiry to look into these allocations, because this is serious enough. No, they swear at him. And you're thinking, really? But I also look at it and I say, you see, I don't know about you, but whenever you get an insult as a response, that tells me that you don't have a logical comeback. Whenever you get an insult as a response, it tells me that you are trying to make me look less credible. Whenever you get an insult as a response, it tells me that you're trying to intimidate me. Whenever you get an insult as a response, it tells me that you are failing to engage with the facts that I'm putting on the table, period. So your response can only be an insult. Because I really thought that we could have, and now the guy has been taken to court, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying, for what? For what? He has actually said, I told the sitting minister. And if you listen to that interview, Andre says, I told the sitting minister, and his response to his colleague in the room was, I guess it was inevitable that this was going to come out. Really? And you taking the man to court? Is that where we are as a country? So then forgive me when I say we have degenerated from being a rainbow state to being a mafia state. So why are you surprised that you've got these criminal elements roaming the streets? It's because the message from the top says, crime pays. That is the message. We are actually saying crime pays. There is no disincentive for doing crime in this country. You see, our problem as a country when it comes to corruption is a culture problem. A culture that has been cultivated and set from the top. The political culture in South Africa is that being accused of crime is not embarrassing. The political culture in South Africa is that we have a culture that is conducive to theft. And if that is the culture at the top, as I'm saying, what makes us think that ordinary South Africans are not going to follow suit? Because clearly crime pays, and by the way, you can still be a criminal and hold a high political office in this country. And better yet, you can be the president of the country, being implicated in things like that. You see, when you're sitting with the president of the country, with the potential money laundering and whatever other contravention that comes with the Pala case, that is problematic. Because when you're sitting in that situation a decent human being would recuse themselves and say, I would rather this thing be dealt with and it be finalized before I actually step back into office. You know, I laughed in December when I was looking at the ANC National Conference and I saw Nomvula Mukonyana in the top 7. I thought, seriously? This is the person who sold this country for a Louis Vuitton bag and chicken pieces. She's making decisions for South Africa today. I mean, really? How is anyone supposed to take us seriously as a country? It is a joke. Andre de Ruyter says, the money that we're losing as a country is potentially R1 billion per month from crime and corruption and malfeasance in Eskom, just in Eskom alone. And remember, we've got 743 SOEs. 743 SOEs is what we have in this country. Eskom is just but one. You've got SAPC, you've got Denel, you've got South African Postal. All of them are dysfunctional. All of them depend on some form of government grant for a bailout. And the same criminality that is happening at Eskom, times that by 743. Of course, the scale is much lower in all the other SOEs. And you look at it and say, what are we even doing with 743 SOEs? But we've got 743 SOEs. And from one of them, you are leaking R1 billion per month due to crime. Now, you're sitting in a country whose youth unemployment is 75% in terms of the expanded definition. You're sitting in the country where poverty levels are more than 50%. You're sitting in the most unequal society in the world. You're sitting in a country where you have more people that are unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. What is the opportunity cost of R1 billion per month that actually goes to crime? And I would have thought, just listening to that figure alone, government should have said, we've got an obligation to actually investigate this and see how we get to the bottom of it. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've said, we are here, you are here, Tapa is here, you are having this conversation because this fish called South Africa is rotten from the head. You know, countries fall apart when governance fails at government level. You know, in the same way that the National Party government before 1994 was associated with apartheid, this ANC-led government is synonymous with corruption. And the biggest weakness in South Africa today is that the politics no longer work. The weakness and the reason why we're having this conversation, it's because the politics are not working in this country. You see, I'm not talking politics. I'm talking economics. Because just by the way, in case you are not aware, politics equals economics. Ours is a political economy. So what happens in politics matters. It matters because the biggest constraint of this country's economic growth is the politics. So when we make stupid decisions at the helm, it impacts the economics. So what happens in the ANC matters. And I follow it because it matters. Yes, the DA and whatever are important, but what happens in the ANC matters. It matters because this is an ANC-led government. What happens there seals our fate as the 62 million South Africans. What happens there means that as a country we get affected. What happens there means that you are going to be impacted on your ordinary day-to-day basis. When they self-mutilate the way they are self-mutilating at the moment, it means that this country continues to go to the dumps. You know, last year sometime I participated in a News 24 conference at the Sandton Convention Center. And Judge Raymond Zondo was giving the keynote address. He said something quite concerning. He said, Parliament could have stopped the state capture project, but they didn't. They didn't because the ANC protected it. They protected it by pushing back against the motions of no confidence that were brought to Parliament by the smaller parties. So, if they wanted to do the right thing, they would have looked into those motions of no confidence. He also went on to say, when the president and the national chairperson of the ANC, Gwede Mantashe, appeared before me at the Zondo Commission, they told me, and they told the entire country, of course, that the ANC policy is that ANC MPs cannot vote against their own party in Parliament, even when they know that the president is in the wrong. And his conclusion is that if this were to occur again, and this is exactly what is happening. What Andre de Ruyter is raising is another state capture, or is state capture continuing? So he says, if this were to occur again, I, as the Chief Justice of this country, do not have confidence that the ANC will be able to stop it. And he is right. Because the response that they gave to the allegations by Andre are very telling. So maybe let's accept that the former glorious movement of Oliver Tambo, of Nelson Mandela, of Walter Sisulu has turned into this unrecognizable, corrupt monster that is afflicting South African society. And the elephant in the room that we have to confront as South Africans is that there's just too many crooks in the ANC, and they far outnumber the few good men and women who want to do the right thing. You see, once you have elected officials who see nothing wrong by stealing food parcels from the hungry and PPE from the sick and dying, then you know for sure that you have lost it. You know, governments matter because that is what sets countries apart. When you want to see why one country is a prospering country and another one is a failing state, you just need to look at the government. I spoke earlier on about what country we had in 1994 and what country we have 30 years later. So it is not geography that sets countries apart. It is not ethnicity. It is not strongman leadership. It is not natural endowments. It is governments. Governments are what separates good, prosperous states from bad, failing states. And unfortunately, in our case, our leaders are not what they ought to be. That is why you are sitting here today with Tapa coming all the way from Germany to try and solve for the crime in this country. Because government is failing. And our focus right now as a country needs to be economic recovery. It needs to be economic recovery because we've got way too many people who are not participating in the economic mainstream. I was talking to one CEO last week, and they were actually saying, you know, you're mentioning all these risks as a country. My view is that the number one risk that all of us as a country, businesses in the main, are actually facing, our number one risk is youth unemployment. It is youth unemployment because you are asking for trouble when you have 75% young people running loose in the streets. Their hands are going to find something to do. And what that would be, unfortunately, is not going to augur well for South Africa. That is the ticking time bomb that we are sitting with as a country. So we need to be solving for economic growth and trying to get investment into this country. Why? Because we need it. Because that is the only way we are going to get ourselves out of this economic rut. I was listening to the president during the State of the Nation address. He speaks about a 2 trillion rands investment target by what did he say? Did he say 2035 or did he say 2030? And I look at it and I say, how, Mr. President? How do you hope to get investors into this country when we are failing at the basics? When, as soon as they step into this country, or before they even step into, when they sit and have discussions wherever they are sitting, yes, South Africa is a gateway-ish to the African continent, because I think let's agree that Kenya, Rwanda, Nigeria, Ghana, all those smaller and less advanced economies in the continent are eating our breakfast as South Africa. So yes, we are still a gateway to the African continent. But then you have to tell them that, oh, by the way, some days or most days, you're going to sit without electricity for 10 hours. So make sure that you can actually put an investment in place for your own electricity. And you might just as well need to dig your own borehole, because water is going to be our next crisis. And oh, if you're going to be importing and exporting, just know that you can't use our Durban ports. You see, they are useless. You have to bypass the Durban ports and go to the Mozambique ports. And then you have to put your consignment on the road. Thorsten right now was talking about the fact that the truck hijacking in this country is unparalleled. You have to put your consignment on the road to wherever in the country. And just be careful, tell your driver not to, I don't know, because then they will hijack him. And if he's a foreign national, they'll kill him and they'll say he's Zimbabwean. And you must make sure that you are insured, because there's potholes in there. What business case is that? How do you get 2 trillion rands in the... So if, you're sitting with a JSE that is 65% foreign owned, which means that a VW, a BMW, a BP, a Total, a Shell, think about all these big companies. They don't make the investment decisions here in South Africa. They have to go to their principal countries. So we're having this conversation with the CEO of Total, who was actually saying, I'm struggling to put a solid business case for my principals in France. Around why? Because they sit with one investment allocation. So France International decides we've got 100 rands to invest globally. So and this is what I always say to these government ministers when we have these conversations, to say you're making it very difficult for business to invest here, because BMW CEO will tell you that, my biggest competitor is not Mercedes-Benz South Africa. My biggest competitor is BMW China, it's BMW UK, it's BMW US, it's BMW Brazil. Because when I sit in Germany and we have to decide and put a business case for investment allocation, the business case that I have to put across has to be as solid as China and UK and US. And what is my business case as BMW South Africa? So when we're saying we're trying to get foreign direct investment, do we understand what that means? Do we understand what interventions are required for us to be able to get that foreign direct investment? Because I don't think we do. So investment is the most important thing, and you have to tell them that, and you have to join TAPA. I'm sure Thorsten will be happy that they actually have to join TAPA. So when you want to invest in this country, you have to join TAPA, because you have to make sure, that your cargo and your, is protected and whatever the case is. Now, that is not a solid business case. So investment matters. That is why the issue of criminality matters. For your businesses to continue to invest in this country, you have to arrest the issue of criminality. So we have to make sure that the interventions that we actually put in place are those that will make sure that we deal with the criminality. Earlier on, I said our problem as a country is that we have way too many people who have nothing to lose. And that is why investment matters. That is why businesses matters. That is why government needs to sit up and listen when industry says we are not happy about 1, 2, 3, because industry and business is what pays for this entire 5 trillion rands economy. We are what pays for this entire party that we are currently having as South Africa. So when business speaks, government has to make sure that it listens. And it's okay, it's fine. They're trying to put 350 unemployment grant here and there, and they're trying to do all these things and whatever the case is. But this is something that a colleague of mine said the other day. He says, you know, Busi, we're sitting in a very dangerous territory as a country because we have way too many people who have nothing to lose. He said, I remember when that was me, many years ago, as a youngster growing up in this country, we found ourselves in the same situation where we had nothing to lose. He said, as much as we knew that going out against the police and the South African Defense Force and whatever the case was happening in this country in the 80s, you knew you would be killed, you knew you would get shot, you knew you could be paralyzed. He said, but we didn't care. We didn't care because we had nothing to lose. So we are putting this 75% young people today in the same position. They are sitting there and they are saying, what the hell? I'm poor anyway and my prospects don't look good. So I have nothing to lose. So that is why the July anarchy happened. Because I'd rather go and take my chances on the street. He says you want as a country to ensure that your people have got something to lose. He says because when people have got something to lose, they are more moderated. They think before they act. And if that was our number one priority as a country, we wouldn't be taking world records for all these terrible things that we're actually known for as a country. So we need to know as a country that the issue of crime and corruption matters. It matters because as long as the poor, and we have a lot of poor people in this country, as long as the poor won't eat, then the rich are not going to sleep. And maybe it's not because maybe it's not between poor and rich. It's between the haves and the have-nots. As long as the have-nots do not eat, then the haves are not going to sleep. And we therefore need to look at what does positioning South Africa as an investment destination look like in this context. So, as I draw to a close, because I think my time is up, I want to just say I'm extremely encouraged. Yes, we have all this doom and gloom. There's a lot of things that are not going right in this country, but I'm extremely encouraged. I'm extremely encouraged because of the patriotism that you see from business in particular in this country. You know, the response of business to the challenges that we have in this country is how do we help? And Johan there, my colleague, will tell you that as BLSA, there is so much we're doing to help. We're working with the police, working with the NPA, you're working with NICOM, you're working with ESCOM, there is so much money that business is putting in terms of trying to ensure that this ANC-led government can be a capable state. And I really think that you've got a very patriotic industry in South Africa and business community in South Africa. And I think the very reason why you are having this conversation today is precisely testament of the fact that business in this country is not sitting in its laurels. They are actively trying to look for solutions of how do we solve for the challenges that we actually have in this country. So lawlessness, as I've said, is the biggest crisis that we have in this country, and it is business's crisis as much as it is government's. You see, we also have to understand as business, because we are not innocent in all of this, business has to understand that as the grouping that has levers to economic power, we have a special responsibility to work firmly towards addressing the challenges of this country. Because you see, some things are bigger than self-interest. And those are issues of national interest. And the issues of national interest, just like crime and corruption, need to be elevated above all. They can't just be left to government, because unfortunately, if this government fails, then South Africa fails. And if South Africa fails, then business fails. And you know what they say. They say, show me a failed state, and I'll show you a failed nation. So if we allow South Africa to fail, it means we would have failed as well as South Africans. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm speechless, but it was really a very, 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 very impressive presentation. Thank you for that. I strongly believe in your first life you were born in Italy. So because it sounded a little bit like, you should come to the European Union with me to Brussels. You could say exactly the same, and change it into, you in Brussels, you are this, it's exactly the same situation. Except you have electric fences. We don't have them, Again, really, a big thank you. It was really an eye-opening speech. I really loved it. I hope we will stay in contact. I know that you are in direct contact with Massimo. Please continue on this one. As I said, partnership, working on that. And you're absolutely right. I can give you an example. We had so many losses at the London Heathrow Airport, the industry, that the industry completely banned shipping products via Heathrow. We even called London Heathrow for a while London Thiethrow, because it was so difficult. We had another situation at the Brussels International Airport where even the police said to the high-value manufacturers, please do not ship products via Brussels Airport. It's too dangerous right now. We cannot control your shipments. It's a massive impact on the economy, and that's really quite important. We will have a break, so enjoy coffee and networking in the area. We will expand it a little bit by 11:10. So 10 past 11, please be back. And enjoy the break. Have fun networking, very important. See you later, okay?